Part 4 on how my best friend faked their own death. So I got a letter in the mail and it was from Amanda. I was so shocked about the letter, I opened it up really quickly. When I read it, I found out that it was a suicide letter. And I just sat there and cried. I had went to her house and knocked on the door to let her mom know, but her mom also received the same letter. After a couple days, her mom did have the police do another search and no one could find her. I was hoping maybe she didn't commit suicide in a place that we could never find her. I don't know, but it just didn't feel right, and how she just left off this way. Her mom just couldn't believe it. So a couple months I would stay inside her mom's house. I'd sleep inside of her room, just grieving her being lost. But I couldn't believe that she committed suicide. I didn't believe that she was dead, and neither did her mom. Deep down I knew that she was somewhere out there. Come back for Part 5 on how my best friend faked her death. So after 2 years of Amanda being missing, even though she wrote those letters to us, we both still didn't believe that she was gone. And I thought about her just about every day. During these years, her mom would constantly do searches. Maybe if she wasn't alive, then maybe they could find her body. Then she would find the truth. Her mom couldn't accept the fact that maybe she was dead. And every week on Sunday, she'd go out there even by herself. My mom and a few of her friends would always tell her she can't keep doing that. She'll even sometimes go out in the middle of the night, walk around calling for her. And her mom started to get really sick. After the 3rd year of her being gone, her dad finally came inside the picture. Amanda was never really close with her dad. He wasn't really a part of her life. He started to see how mentally ill her mother was becoming, so he decided to set up a funeral so this all could end. But her mom didn't want to attend. Come back for Part 6 on how my best friend faked her death. So her dad wanted to set up the funeral so they could finally end this grieving. Her mom didn't want to attend because she didn't believe that she was dead, and I still couldn't believe it either. Her dad read the note and he wanted them both to stop all this pain. After a couple months battling out of doing a funeral, he finally did one. And I started thinking, maybe she is gone, because maybe then I could let go of this whole situation. So, of course, me and my family attended the funeral. Of course, they had no body to bury, but they did set up a grave. And they put her stone in the ground. So, after 11 years of that happening, I believe that she was dead. I had moved to Texas, met my husband, which I married, and I got pregnant. Maybe 4 months into my pregnancy, I wanted to take mommy classes. And when I got there, the instructor looked like Amanda's mom. Part 7 on how my best friend faked her death. I got pregnant and I wanted to start taking mommy classes. When I had got to the class, the instructor looked like Amanda's mom, but almost like a younger version. When I looked at her face even closer, she had the same mold that Amanda had down the bottom of her chin. And then I snapped. That's Amanda. When I walked up to her and said, Amanda, she looked at me and froze. After she stared at me for 5 seconds, a girl comes up to her and says, Mom. I looked over and gasped. After she talked with her daughter, there was more and more women coming in for the class. And once I realized it was her, I ran back to my car. When I got to my car, I started to have a panic attack because that was her. And the daughter that called for her had to be maybe 12 or 13 years old. And I started to think, in order for Amanda to have a 12-year-old now, she would have to have gotten pregnant months before she went missing. Story time on how my parents forced me into acting. I played roles that were on TV networks like Disney Channel and Nickelodeon. And I also did PBS Kids and a few other networks. As a child actor, my parents expected a lot from me. The roles that I played would pay the bills at home. When I was younger and I was acting, I didn't know that money came with it. So whenever I did act, if anything that had to do with money, my parents would handle it. And still to this day, I haven't seen that money. But anyways, so during my time of acting, my parents put me in acting classes, singing, and dancing. They really wanted me to be that triple threat. But when it came to these shows that I played in, I would never get the main character. I'd always be casted like an extra that had a few lines. When I finally got my big break, I was casted in the Hannah Montana show. But you will not believe what my parents had to do for me to get there. Part 2 on how my parents forced me into acting. So finally, I got a major role in a Hannah Montana show For my role, I necessarily didn't audition. My parents built up a contract and forced my signature. In order for me to play the role, there were certain things that I had to do. When it came to getting clothes, I had to make sure I bought my clothes with the money that I made at my previous acting jobs. I had to make sure my own makeup was done, had to make sure my own hair was done, and I also had to do janitor work, as in like sweep, mop the floors. Maybe a good 2 months before the show had started, I had to get the stage set up and the scene. 2 months of working and not really getting paid for it. The head of Disney had found out about the contract and forced to sue my parents if they had continued with it. After the whole situation, I never got the role, and I put all that work in for no compensation and no. So apparently, you could use 𝙎𝙤𝙧𝙚𝙤 liquid eyeshadow for multiple uses. Alright, let's test it out. So today, I just got 𝙎𝙤𝙧𝙚's new Chroma collection. I'll of course be trying the liquid eyeshadow as spoken before. First, let's see how this looks as eyeliner. Oh, that's not that bad. That's actually pretty nice. Alright, on to the next. Now testing as highlight. Doo-doo-doo-doo-doo. Darling, we're looking pretty snatched today. Alright, lips. La 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 la, la 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 la. Elmo show. Elmo, whoa. Who told you to look that good? I'm sorry, y'all. 𝙎𝙤𝙧𝙚 understood the assignment. Story time on how I joined a cult that believed in preteen marriages. And I'm talking 10, 11, and 12 years old. Now, when I first joined, I didn't know it was a cult. I just thought it was a place where people just praised God. So coming into it, I recently had just lost my father. And my uncle suggested that I come to these circle meetings. And the meetings help with things like grief. When I joined, everything was fine, and I was getting the help. Instead of thinking deeply about my heart, they got me to think deeply about my brain and my mental health. And our teacher, he didn't like to be called pastor. He just talked about the ways of the world and God's plan. One thing I noticed that with his lessons, he would never use a Bible. I never questioned it because I believed it's because he knew a lot about it. But that was a red flag. I'll be back with a part 2. Part 2 on how I joined a cult. So our teacher, aka, was kind of like a preacher. One of the red flags were the fact that he never read from the Bible. And I always assumed because maybe he just knew a lot. So anyways, as I'm spending my time at this cult, they were telling me how I should be dressing, how I should speak to others, and always staying with the family. And anyone that didn't believe what we believed were looked at as devils. So after a couple months, I started back up with college, and I started hanging out with my friends again. So one day there was a block party going on, and of course I went with my friends. Then I saw this one guy from my church. I said, hey, gave him a hug, and he asked me about my friends. They turned around and said hey to him, and then he looked at him strangely, pulled me aside and said, you should not be hanging out with these girls. He was talking about how they were dressing and how they're basically Satan. It gets crazier. Part 3 on how I joined a cult. So the guy from my church that I saw at the block party, he was talking about how my friends were dressing, how they talked and saying that they were Satan. He told me to stay away from them. And he was telling me that if I continued to be around them, that I will be cursed. He said that he was going to tell the group about my situation with me hanging out with them, and that he prays that I stay away from them. But if I continue to be friends with them, that I will be part of this whole demon tribe. And it's crazy because I looked at that man as one of the father figures inside the group, but now I just felt like that was controlling. I told him that they were good people and that we've been friends for years and that I'm not going to go anywhere. Then he took some water from his pocket, which I believe was probably holy water. He splashed it on his hands and put it on my forehead and said, rebuke the devil. Literally in the middle of the block party, everybody was looking at us like we were crazy. I told him to get off of me and he would not let go. And he was squeezing my arm so tight to the point